Well, we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. My name is Marie Henderson, and I am the Director of Performance Analytics in the Office of Student Success at the University of Arizona Global Campus, and I am one of your hosts today.
Hello, and I'm Dr. Jonathan Ochoa. I'm an associate faculty here at the University of Arizona Global Campus, and I have the privilege of introducing both of our guest speakers today. Um, I'm honored to introduce the first one. Not that I'm not honored to introduce the second one, but I have a connection with the first one. She was actually my last in residency professor as I was getting my dissertation here at the University of Arizona Global Campus. Her name is Dr. Heather Pederson, and she's a professor here in the College of Professional Advancement here at the University of Arizona Global Campus. And she has worked for over 20 years in the doctoral programs. Heather's work focuses on supporting faculty and students through initiative practical approaches to teaching and learning, including the thoughtful integration of emerging tools like generative AI. She is passionate about creating clear, supportive structures that promote student success, academic integrity, and meaningful engagement using the culture of care lens. And then the other guest speaker today is Dr. Ellen, I want to say that Beattie
It's
is
Beattie.
an Beattie is an assistant professor in the College of Professional Advancement here at the University of Arizona Global Campus. Ellen's teaching spans undergraduate through doctoral learners and focuses on student success, educational leadership, and research methods. Her research blends applied neuroscience, positive psychology, and mindfulness to explore how emotions, well-being, and leadership practices shape academic and organizational outcomes. Thank you both for what you're doing today, and now you have the floor.
Thank you very much. We're going to have a little bit of guest participation, so we're going to be asking you to utilize the chat function, and we'll let you know when it's time to do that. I know it's Friday afternoon, and in my neck of the woods, it's 2 o'clock for both Ellen and myself. So thanks for sticking with it. I know day 3 of any summit, you're kind of getting presented out, so we appreciate you being here. Ellen and I were talking yesterday about how, our presentation, it's a bit of a hot button issue. And it really doesn't matter what level you're teaching. AI is being used in your courses. Ellen and I both have a lot of experience in doctoral education, but this past year, she and I both started teaching undergrad courses as well. So it's been really interesting to have conversations around how students are using AI in those undergrad, Gen 101 or in the writing early on writing courses compared to how they're using it at the doctoral level. So I think it's safe to say that we all have some kind of shared experiences with this. We know that our students are absolutely, without a doubt, using AI. And so, our first question that we're going to pose to you, and this is just yes or no. In the chat, please respond with a yes or no. If you are a teacher or you work with students in any capacity, are you able to tell when a student uses generative AI to complete an assignment or any type of work? So please type that in the chat. And Ellen's monitoring that, so I would love to hear the responses. I think I know what the responses will be.
Well, we started off strong with a lot of yeses, and we've got a no or two. We
Okay.
have usually, which is a fair response as well.
Yeah. I have been telling my students now that it takes me 10 to 20 seconds when I start reading a discussion board response or an essay type paper. If it's a copy and paste from generative AI. It's very easy for me to kind of see those indicators now. But I know it's not as easy as students get kind of better at using the responses. So, what I would like to know is just in 1 or 2 words, those of you who said yes or, usually, how can you tell? How can you tell? Type that in the chat, please.
Okay, they are rolling in now, Heather. So Chris says the submission says it was generated by AI. That's a good one. Yeah, Chris, that's good. Jackie's mentioning hyphens and quotes, and lists of three, not this, but that. The famous M dash, of course. Sometimes their language in the discussion forum does not match their written assignments. Yes. Doesn't match their original voice, lots of dashes. Someone mentions it's too well written.
Yes.
Structure, fabricated references, sentence structure, the tone and the language, excessive bulleting. Yeah, lots of great responses here.
Excellent. And so what we call those are indicators. We would love to call them proof, but we call them indicators. Those are absolute indicators. And if you actually went into any generative AI, Chat GPT, whatever you would like, and typed in, how do I know if my student is using generative AI? All of those things that everyone just said, that would probably appear. AI could tell you what to look for. So, artificial intelligence is absolutely here to stay, whether we like it or not. And unfortunately, preventing AI use, is impossible because it's nearly impossible to prove. And even if you tell your students you may not use it, you can't prevent them from using it. It would almost be as difficult as telling them they can't use Google or Google Scholar or anything else that's in that computer to do their work. And so these scenarios here, some are painfully obvious. The M dashes, students, people in general don't use M dashes frequently. And if you copied and pasted, a two-page response from Chat GPT, it will be used multiple times. And the series of three, especially at the end of a sentence, overly complex writing. And another big one is incorrect context for the course. So it really sounds good at the surface, but if you really look a little bit more deeply, you realize, wow, this could really be written for almost anything. It's not the correct context. And if you know your students' work well enough, the student work may feel off, like there's a shift in the writing quality, or all of a sudden you have a student, and I noticed this in the undergrad at the beginning writing courses, where they're not great writers yet, and that's okay. The course is meant to be a learning experience, but all of a sudden, during week 2, it's perfect, and it's almost too perfect, and they're using overly formal language. So those are some of the indicators. Unfortunately, detection tools are unreliable. I used to pay for Chat GPT 0. I paid for a year subscription, I think, last year, and it honestly was completely useless. And so faculty, we are left with uncertainty. We have training opportunities. I know many of you, like myself, go to as many as you can. I think Nate Pritz has offered some really, really great and valuable trainings, but we haven't had any sort of extremely formal, everyone needs to go through this training, and this is how we're going to handle these scenarios. And there's also no real clear policies. So, how do you feel when you know that you have a student who used AI to complete an assignment? I want you to pop it into the chat. The things that came to mind for me, how I have felt all of these things. But I would just like to know, how do you feel when you know that a student has used AI to complete an assignment? Or maybe you don't know at 100%, but you suspect it. How does that make you feel as a faculty member? Because this is something new for us, right?
Insulted, frustrated,
Yes.
wasting my time.
Yes. Those are all good responses. I know I have felt like, why even bother to do this? Because they're just cheating their way through. You can't really do anything about it. And so I think we really need some clear guidance, and there are some evidence-based things that we're going to be talking about. So you absolutely are not alone in this. As a group, and here's another thing, it's not just at UAGC, it's everywhere. It's in high schools, it's in middle schools, even elementary students are now able to effectively use AI. Ask me how I know. I have twins who are juniors in high school, and I have a daughter in college, and they probably can use AI better than me. And so we've had some long discussions about kind of the do's and don'ts, and if you do this, this could be the consequence. So you are not alone, and hopefully today we can provide you with some strategies. Anything else in the chat, Ellen?
Oh, so many good things. A few people want to expose them for their AI use, and some disappointment, right?
Yeah,
I'm also seeing a really good comment about, I feel like the student must have too much on their plate and is not valuing the moment of learning, which I think is really
that's really valid.
um,
Yes,
part of the
absolutely.
reason why I think so many of these negative emotions are coming up is because using AI to generate writing and then submitting it as a student has actually done the writing goes against our core values of education, right? Originality, trust, respect, citing correctly. All of those core values get questioned when we start to see that auto-generated writing in our classrooms, in our discussions, and in our written assignments.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we do want to be very crystal clear that AI is not the problem, right? It's the improper use of artificial intelligence, especially that copying and pasting right from that thread right into our discussion forum or right into our assignment. It disrupts this whole idea of authorship. We don't know who really wrote the work itself. And AI is challenging our ability to determine whether that student is actually learning anything from our instruction. It raises a lot of concerns about the effectiveness of our once solid plagiarism detection tools, which just throws a lot of things into question for ourselves. And we are left to navigate a few challenging situations. One of those, of course, is that we don't have the ability to navigate whether the student is actually producing the work themselves or not. And that raises additional concerns about all of us and our thinking and our beliefs around artificial intelligence. Everyone is using artificial intelligence differently. Everyone probably has differing views on what is and is not right. There is no one set standard, this is acceptable, this is not acceptable. And in that ambiguity, it really feels like we are isolated when we are approached with these student situations. And that causes us to weigh some also challenging situations, right? We want to be able to prove that something is AI generated or not. But to this point, right, we don't have that ability. We have sneaking suspicions. We have all of the indicators that Heather mentioned earlier and you shared in the chat box, but really we don't have any solid proof that wrongdoing has happened. We also are challenged by the fact that we want to control for things like academic honesty and integrity, but we also want to make sure that learning is happening. And that puts us into a challenging position, right? I saw someone mention in the chat box that when our students' follow-up discussion posts are more elaborate than ours are, that challenges the whole situation because we want them to be engaged in those discussions. We want them to be sharing their thoughts, their ideas that they've gathered from the course content. but we just really can't be sure of any writing anymore. And that kind of allows us to get to a place where we feel like we need norms, we need strategies, and we don't really have them yet, right? So that's the conversation that we want to start today. We want to start thinking about how can we be supporting faculty, and how can we be allowed to explore artificial intelligence in a way that makes sense for us and for our students. And so generative AI did not break our academic integrity, but it did reveal where our systems were already fragile. And in order for us to create solid academic learning environments, it means that we probably have to do some things that we are not quite ready for or comfortable with doing. We do need to redesign curriculum. We do need to make sure that our instruction and our assessment are around fostering authenticity and transparency and learning-centered assessments, rather than being just an enforcer of academic integrity. And so it really requires us to be an educator, right? Bringing us back to our role of educator. And for a lot of us, that's a challenging place to be, right? Our IQRs ask us to run those Turnitin reports. We've been policing misconduct in an academic setting for a very long time. It's just now that with the new artificial intelligence tools, that job becomes a little bit more challenging, and it really requires us to shift our role.
One thing I wanted to add is that we are, given X amount of time to teach our courses and to have different meetings. What we are really going to need is some heavy duty course redesign, and we're going to need the time and kind of incentives to do so. And we can't be working in isolation. It's going to have to move from everyone kind of handling this in their own way to some sort of coordinated practice, because I think as faculty, we're only going to deal with this frustration for so long. And the more we, see this happening and, realizing that kind of our hands are tied a little bit, I think that's when we go to, our supervisors, and then our supervisors are hearing, oh, this is what's going on in the classroom. And I really do feel as though it has to go all the way up the chain, in order for us to get some coordinated effort and some time to really work as an institution to, handle these issues.
Right, because we can't make instant changes.
Oh, I can't hear you, Ellen.
Oh. Can you hear me now?
I can't, but maybe others can. It's very, very, very low.
Yeah, we're having a lot of trouble hearing you, Ellen. Even when you were speaking, it sounded like you were really far away from the microphone.
Oh, that's odd.
Try talking now.
Okay, is that better?
I can hear you. You're just very quiet. So you may
Okay,
have to just speak.
I will talk a little bit louder. Is that a little bit better?
It is.
All right, I will use my cheerleading voice for the rest of the presentation. Well, yes. So I was just jumping back in to say that we can't make quick changes to our master course shells. We also can't really stay ahead of artificial intelligence, right? The things that artificial intelligence had trouble doing or couldn't really do a year or so ago, right? That's not reality anymore. All right, so what we want to do is to position care and a caring framework around authorship. And while we can't prove authorship, we still need to respond as educators And the way we respond requires us to make sure learning and trust and integrity are the most important. So many of us have been trained to detect plagiarism, but we haven't necessarily been trained to evaluate the ambiguity that's coming with this. And so many of our questions are no longer, did the student cheat? Rather, it becomes, how do we respond when the authorship of that discussion post or that assignment is really unclear? And clearly the answer is not banning artificial intelligence, right? But it's embedding it into the learning intentionally. And so what we need is something practical, something we can say in the moment. And so our CARE framework is not a script. It's just a way of thinking and responding. And that's where this framework comes in. The CARE framework is a way to pause, to respond intentionally, and to keep the focus on learning. The CARE framework stands for curiosity, assume growth, relational communication, and evidence-informed action. The key insights connect to the CARE framework. So C is for curiosity. Many integrity violations arise from unclear expectations, not really deliberate misconduct. And so really we want to start with inquiry, not accusation. And that might look like saying things like, what tools did you use when you were working on this? Or how does this align with the specific prompt or directions? Ideally, we want to normalize conversations around AI. We don't want to get into a position where the only time we talk about artificial intelligence tools is when we are bringing up suspicious activity on behalf of the students. We want to invite conversations around tool use. How can it be helpful? What are the cautions that we want to pay attention to? And we want to remove that fear that students might have from disclosure, right? We want to open up the conversations to talk about when and how might artificial intelligence actually be able to be used to enhance the learning. And that brings us to our next element.
So we want to assume growth, not guilt. It's really easy. I'm totally guilty of doing this, is thinking that student simply cheated. They did it on purpose. They're looking for an easy way out. They're trying to get it done quickly and accurately. However, we can frame it as a learning opportunity. So students may not fully understand boundaries. Probably most do not understand how to really use AI as a learning tool. And so they're using it to complete assignments, and they're using it inappropriately because they've never been taught how to use it appropriately. And so we can really approach it as a teachable moment. It does take a lot of extra time to do this, especially because when we have these incidences, we aren't speaking to the group. We're not posting it to the discussion board unless it's, generally speaking, we are one-on-one with the student. You always want to have these types of conversations in private because students will oftentimes feel as though they're being accused. And AI use doesn't automatically mean that there was an intent to cheat. So try to check understanding without accusing. You can have follow-up conversations. You can ask students to explain their process and how they went about completing the assignment. And you can also use voice and video reflection. You can ask them. We can embed that into our course. And Ellen, you can do the R, the relational communication.
Yeah, because above everything else, right, we want to maintain those relationships that we have with our students, right? So instead of saying things like, hey, I know AI wrote your discussion post, right? We can probably maintain our relationships far better if we go back to the curiosity element And when we are communicating with our students, we are asking them, how did you use those artificial intelligence tools? How did you approach this? And more often than not, students are open to sharing about how they have decided to go about using those tools in their work.
Absolutely. And evidence-informed next steps. This kind of goes back to what we were talking about. We need to do this as an institution and as departments instead of as individuals. And so at the university level, we can be more focused on process-based assignments, so various drafts. There can be draft checkpoints, authentic assessments, and I think really it's going to circle back to some student training and some faculty training on appropriate uses of AI. And so I think we could get really creative with authentic learning and assessments, really personalized assignments. I just created a course where students, again, are going to be using AI all the way through. So they already know that it's allowable. And at the bottom in the directions, it very clearly explains appropriate use for this assignment and inappropriate use for this assignment. So it gives some more guidelines. That course hasn't gone live yet, but it'll be interesting to see, when it does. So in the chat, what would you do? One of your students submits highly polished work inconsistent with prior submissions. You don't have the proof, right? Because it's impossible to prove. So please pop in the chat if you'd like to. What would you say and do? Because I know what I did and do. So what do you think? And I know no one would type this, but I think some faculty members are probably somewhat ignoring some of these instances, because if you have 30 students in a class and 20 of them, you think, maybe could go either way, you probably don't even have time to address all of those things.
So Elizabeth is saying that this has happened to her. She called the student and had a discussion and let them know that it looked like it was AI generated.
So there are some possible care-centered responses. We really want to do these privately, of course. So Zoom is a good option. And you can kind of tell a lot when you're one-on-one with someone via Zoom. You can ask them about the process. You can take the time to clarify expectations and provide opportunity for revision or explanation. And this approach really does come from a lens of care. And at the end of the day, we don't really need the proof. We can see it, we know what's going on, and conversations are oftentimes more powerful than accusations. I know I had a student who, this was early on, and I submitted an I wrote. I asked her, she said yes, she used a generative AI, and it was pretty egregious. It was very obvious. Many of those indicators were present, and I submitted an I wrote for multiple assignments, and they came back and said, sorry, we can't prove it. So my hands were tied, even though the student admitted it, and then later she retracted that admission of guilt when I asked her to redo the assignment. So she ended up passing the course. I was able to deduct some points via the rubric, but it really felt unethical to me. And I now handle it very differently by having conversations.
Yeah, a
And
good
so,
comment
oh,
in
go
the
ahead.
chat box about if it's a discussion post, they follow up with a deeper level reflection and ask the student to elaborate on the next point.
Yes. So our closing thoughts, when we lead with care, we don't lower our standards, we elevate learning. And I think we have a really big job to do. And what we would like to do is we would like to take this chat and all of the responses and capture that for our executive leadership team so they can really get some firsthand accounts of what we're experiencing. So the one final question for the group is, what do you need? What do you need most to help your students navigate generative AI?
A question about, will there ever be a time when Turnitin can help us to detect AI?
I wouldn't think so. I really wouldn't. So teenagers know enough to prompt it, get a response, and then tell it, okay, write it from a 16-year-old's perspective, misspell 2 words, add a couple of extra commas, rearrange the sentences. And so it's nearly going to be impossible to know where the work came from. Elizabeth, that's a great idea. Yeah, I don't believe there's ever going to be a tool that will definitively say, yes, this was AI generated. These are all great ideas. All right, I think we're at our time.
Well, a big thank you to our presenters today, and thank you to all our attendees for joining us and engaging in the chat. We hope you found this conversation inspiring. And this concludes Teaching with Care in the Age of AI, supporting student learning when authorship is unclear. And we've also posted in the chat the links to nominations for our awards, and as well a link to return to the list of sessions so you can join your next session for today. Everybody have a wonderful rest of the day and a wonderful weekend.